Well, hello, everybody. Welcome. We're going to let the room fill in a little bit. Thank you for joining us for another welcome webinar. Today, we're going to talk about creativity, storytelling, and risk-taking with Mitch Wu, our dear friend. I'm so pleased to be here today hosting this webinar with one of my favorite photographers and friends. Mitch basically has what many would describe as a dream job, as he has managed to make a full-time career out of playing with toys, photographing amazing scenes using just toy figures and as his subjects. And today we're going to learn a little bit about Mitch's process, his inspiration, and how you can maybe learn and do this on your own. I'm your host, Elizabeth Garcia. I'm here with my friend and colleague, Shireen and Tom. We're going to be reading your questions using the Q&A function. Please also use the chat to mingle and get to know each other. We're also on Facebook Live. Hello, Facebook. Shireen is taking your questions on Facebook for Mitch. Thank you for joining us. This webinar will be around 1 hour. And we'll be asking questions throughout, saving some of the more lengthy ones for the end. We'll be recording this session and you can later view it on YouTube. It'll also stay saved on Facebook. For all of you professional creatives out there, we have a very cool limited time software offer with Boris FX Suite. You can get 3 months of access with the purchase of any Wacom Intuos Pro, Cintiq Pro, or Mobile Studio Pro. And if you're a photographer, it gets you access to next level photo effects with their Optex plugin. Go check it out. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to show you. Here it is. Here he is. Hi, Mitch. How are you?
Hey there. Hey, Elizabeth. How are you? It's so nice to be here. Thanks for having me on your webinar. That's so cool. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mitch. It's been so long. It's been over a year since I last saw you.
Yes.
And when I met you, I knew I just had to bring you on board and talk to you and get to know you. You have such an amazing job, and the stories you tell with your subjects and everything you're able to do with your photo editing skills is amazing. I'm so excited to get to ask you all these questions and learn a little bit about your process.
Cool. This is exciting. Thank you. So, yeah, it's been a wild time since we met and in Los Angeles.
Yes.
At Shaquille's, the restaurant, and you know, the pandemic hit, but things just kept snowballing for me. So it's been a pretty cool journey to date. So I'm happy to share that with your viewers.
Yes, sadly, all the crew and all the friends we met on the road. This is one way we get to check in with you guys through Zoom webinars and little Instagram lives, to keep the spirit alive and to keep learning from you and getting inspired from you guys. So today you're going to give us a very inspiring talk. What will you cover today? I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm just going to kind of take everyone kind of through my journey, just because when I think about where I am now, I can't help but see how that took place and where I came from. So I'm just going to kind of walk as quickly as possible people through kind of what I went through, kind of the trials and tribulations, the challenges that I faced, and ultimately how I ultimately found kind of what I consider like a dream job that I didn't even know existed 5 years ago. So that's kind of the plan.
A dream job indeed. Before you start sharing your screen, Mitch, can you talk to us a little bit about your room behind you? I see all of your favorite friends and characters surrounding you. Is this the toy room or you have multiple toy rooms?
This is the main toy room. It's really my office and studio. It's kind of a studio, but I do most of my shooting not here. I don't have a formal studio. You'll see a few photos where I shoot on my porch in my backyard. If it's something like for Toy Story and it's happening indoors, I'll just shoot like on my kitchen table or maybe on the stairs. So I don't have a studio per se. It's all over or wherever the story takes me. But this is where I do definitely all of my editing, and I spend almost all of my time. I do my marketing from here, all my business stuff. Pretty much everything except shooting takes place in here.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to see what you have to show us. And I love your room.
Thank you. It's fun. It looks cool, but normally it's like really messy. So I'm just going to be real throughout this talk, and that's the first honest thing I'll tell you is that my office is usually a mess. I don't have like these toys that you see in the back is pretty cool. Those are always there, but 90% or the rest of my toys, and I have a lot of them, are just shoved into like clear container boxes. And if you look at other toy photographers, what they do, they have these beautiful display cabinets and with beautiful lighting. And I kind of envy that because it's so easy to see what you have and what you just want to use, you just pull. But for me, it's like everything's just stuffed under a desk in some plastic boxes. So the toys for me are not collections. It's not something that I go out and collect. I buy toys to tell stories. And that's primarily what I love to do, is tell stories. Yeah.
Awesome, beautiful. Well, right on. I can't wait to see what you have to present.
Okay, shall I get started?
Please do.
All right, here we go. Let me hit share screen and okay, am I good?
You're good, Mitch. We
Okay.
can see your presentation now.
All
And
right, so
everybody, please note Mitch's Instagram handle. He's always sharing really inspiring pieces there, and he's so friendly. Go at him.
yeah, please do. So I'm just going to jump right in. Here we go. I thought I was going
to get the look that I want. I'm using explosions, compressed air, and throwing dirt. I'm Mitchell Wu from Los Angeles, and I'm a toy photographer. Yeah. What really drew me to this medium was the ability to tell incredible stories. And to be able to get back to my childhood. Yeah. I'm self-taught. I don't have an assistant. I wear all the hats. You have a couple seconds to capture somebody's attention to tell a story within that shot. I was recruited by Disney, and they moved me to Los Angeles, which was amazing. Maybe my greatest failure was not realizing earlier that I shouldn't be stuck doing something that I don't enjoy. That playfulness and that joy, that's the key.
All right, so cool. I'm just going to jump right into my origin story. We all have an origin story. Mine is unfortunately not as cool as how Peter Parker became Spider-Man, but it's my origin story. And it starts by my growing up in a suburb just outside of San Francisco. It's a town called Daly City. It's extremely foggy. This is basically what I grew up in. When I wasn't playing with my Hot Wheels or I wasn't playing with my army men, you could usually find me climbing through trees in my backyard. This is Koba from Planet of the Apes. My backyard was basically filled with pine trees, and I had a really good friend who lived around the corner and up the street about a half block away, and I could get to his house without ever once touching the ground just by climbing through the trees. It was pretty incredible. I grew up in the 60s, and of course, okay, so I either just woke up from a nap or I seriously needed one here, but I just wanted to show this picture because growing up in the 60s, we of course had a station wagon. And during the summertime, we would take these epic road trips. I had two older brothers, and if I was lucky, they would be in the back seat, and I would get that space in the back where you put your suitcases and stuff. And back there, I'd throw blankets and sleeping bags and pillows. And as soon as we hit the road, my imagination would just take off. I'd grab my toys and start creating these amazing stories so that these wrinkles in the blankets could become, storm-tossed waves, or they could become like snow-capped mountains. It was whatever my imagination came up with. And now when I look back towards that back of the station wagon, and what I did back then, I realized that I traded in that station wagon, the back of the station wagon, for basically my studio. And again, my studio is not a formal studio. It's wherever the story takes me. So it could be here on my porch. It could be here in the backyard. But really what I found is like my so-called studio is the same sanctuary of play that I had in the back of that station wagon. It's the same imagination, same sense of playing. I still feel like that little 10-year-old boy when I'm shooting these toys. So I want to talk about creativity, storytelling, and risk taking. And I'm going to be touching a little bit on like finding a niche and differentiation, how you differentiate yourself, and how that affects your becoming either an asset or a commodity. And then kind of just, it all ties together in knowing your value. So it all starts with creativity. From the time that I was that little kid that you just saw in the station wagon, I was drawing my own comic strips. I came up with my own characters. I was creating my own stories. By the time I reached high school, I knew what I wanted to do with my life, and that was to become an illustrator. I wanted to draw for a living. So I went to the California College of the Arts. It's located in Oakland, California, just across the bay from San Francisco. And just like many of you creators, you know, you either went to school to learn your craft or you're self-taught, or nowadays, of course, you can go online and learn so much, but it all begins with learning kind of the techniques and the fundamentals. So for me, it was, you know, I had teachers that taught me how to kind of like really focus on the technical aspects of drawing. You learn about composition, light and shadow, how that can help create and form your image, and of course, storytelling. Um, this is another drawing that I did for a college science catalog. You know, obviously, what you're looking at now is so different than what's being done today in the art field or illustration. Everything now, not everything, but there's so much that's being done digitally. Obviously, so many of you are doing digital art. But when I was in college, it was in the early '80s. We didn't have any of that. I'd never even used a computer until 1995. So everything was like really old school. It was hand drawn, hand painted, and that's how we learned. But when I look back at what I learned in college, I can see exactly how those things helped form and support what I'm doing now through toy photography. Which leads me to the next thing, risk taking. So when you're in art school, at least for me, you learn all those fundamentals, you learn all the techniques. They send you out with amazing skills, but the one thing they don't teach you is what to do with those skills. Like, how do you actually get a job? Where are you going to find work? How are you going to stay on your path and remain focused on what your original goals were? I can tell you what my goals were when I graduated from college. I had these heroes that were illustrators, and I wanted to be just like them. I wanted to illustrate book covers. I wanted to illustrate magazine covers. I wanted to do editorial illustration. I wanted to illustrate movie posters because a lot of that was being done when I was in art school. But you know, I graduated from art school and I started to work on my portfolio. Somebody came in and saw some of my prints and then said, hey, Mitch, you know, I know this company not far from here that they need artists. And what they do is they do these basically ceramic carousel horses, and they need artists to draw them, and then they'll send them to Asia. They'll be sculpted and they'll be manufactured, and eventually they'll be sold in gift shops like Hallmark. Okay, this was not what I had planned for my career, but at the same time, I saw an opportunity to use the skills that I learned to, you know, to make some money and actually do something while I was still trying to focus on some other things. So I started drawing these carousel horses, and long story short, I ended up freelancing. I ended up getting a full-time job with this company. Okay, so now when I look back, I can see, okay, this is not what I had planned for my career when I was graduating from college. I can look back and see that I'm absolutely starting to veer off that original path that I had to be like a traditional illustrator. And you're going to see that this path goes farther and farther off. But so I started working and doing these designs. It's not just carousel horses. They did mugs. They did, you know, like circus clowns and things like that. And I would draw all of that stuff, and it was cool. My boss eventually comes to me and he goes, "Hey, Mitch, you know, we love what you're doing. How would you like to do this for us in Taiwan?" Because all their sculpting, all of their manufacturing was done in Taiwan. So here's the thing about me. I'm a risk taker. Was it a calculated risk? Absolutely not. If you're taking calculated risks, you're looking at, if I do this, how is that going to help me achieve my end goal? How is that going to help me do what and learn what I need to learn to get me to where I want to be? This was an uncalculated risk. I was in my young or mid 20s. I saw an opportunity to travel to across the world, new experiences, learn a bunch of stuff. And so of course I said yes. So the next thing I know, I'm on a plane to Taiwan. And this is just a fun little story that I have just because it's something I'll never forget. When I first landed in Taiwan, I was on the streets getting a ride back to our corporate house. And this is what I saw. I saw this amazing traffic. It was mind blowing. I grew up just outside of San Francisco. We never saw anything like this. It was mind blowing. The person who was driving me was an agent named Peter, and he looks over to me and he can see that I am just tripping out. And he goes, "Hey, hey, hey, Mitch, 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 it's okay, it's okay. You know, in Taiwan, you don't need to honk your horn. You don't need to open your window and scream at the guy that they're an a-hole. They already know." So that was like my first introduction to this amazing country. And, you know, again, please forgive the hair. This was the 80s, like I told you, but beyond the actual work of learning how to work with factories and working with sculptors and learning that side of the business, culturally, it was just an amazing experience. You can learn so much just by traveling to different countries. And for me, this was a huge education. I worked at Willits for several years. After I left Willits Designs, which did the carousel horses, I started freelancing. And so I was still drawing, but I was firmly planted in product design and product development now. So I'm so far off that original path that I told you about, but this is what I was doing. I was just so focused on this. These were created for licensing. So, and it's another example of how art schools didn't prepare anyone for the outside world, because if they had, they would tell you about, you know, if you create these illustrations, not only can you have them put on cards, but you can license them out to different companies and they can create 3D products out of them, whatever. So these were actually licensed out to different companies. Licensing is an amazing thing. You license out your products, you use the company's money to have them sculpted and developed. They use all the money and then they sell, and then you get your commission or your royalty. So as artists yourselves, really try to think about how you can monetize in not so traditional ways that are so obvious and apparent right at the beginning, but really look deeper into especially licensing. You know, it was a whole new experience for me. I'm sure a lot of artists today, I'm sure a lot of you, you're a lot more sophisticated than we were back then. We didn't have the world at our fingertips with computers and phones to know what's available. So I'm sure a lot of you know about licensing, but for those of you that don't, you can make an incredible career just out of licensing your own designs. Okay, so after I was freelancing for a while, I was recruited by the Walt Disney Company. They moved us down from, when I say us, it was my wife and I. They moved us down from Northern California down to Los Angeles. And these were a couple of drawings that I did for Disney when I was there. Now, for me, drawing was more of a luxury because that's not what I was hired to do. I was hired to work on this line here, which is called the Classics Collection. And they were high-end ceramic sculptures. And I was basically doing the same thing as I was with that carousel company. I was managing artists, I was working with sculptors, I was working with the factories in Asia. This time it was in Thailand, not Taiwan. And I would see the product through until they were approved. And when they went into production, that was not my job anymore. But this is what I did for another 6 years. Working for the Walt Disney Company was amazing. It was the best, and I like to put the quotes, the best job that I've ever had. The culture was amazing. The creativity was unparalleled. I got to work with so many of the original animators and illustrators that worked on the classics. But I'm not sure about you guys, but for me, I recognize that as a creative, I get really restless after working on something very similar for a number of years. So unfortunately, when I was there for 6 years, I really did start to get restless and I started to look for something else. I ended up leaving Disney in 2001 and I started freelancing on different designs. I did some work for Cirque du Soleil. I actually developed this and then licensed it to Cirque du Soleil to sell. So on the left, you can see a contortionist. Her name was Olga. She was like the lead contortionist of a show at the time called Verikai for Cirque du Soleil. I brought her in and we digitally scanned her in like the scanners went around her whole body and took digital imagery of her, and we digitally printed that out into wax and we finished the sculpture and it was cast in pewter. This was actually the final sculpture right here that was sold at the Cirque du Soleil shows. So I did a lot of work for different studios, and all of this was really incredible background because I learned how these organizations work. I learned the culture. I learned how they speak and what they're looking for. I was on the other side. I'm a freelancer now, but back in the Disney days, I hired artists. So I can tell you that it's not that hard to keep a job as a freelancer with a company. if you get your foot in the door, it's already a given that if your foot is in the door, your work is killer. Like you've got an amazing portfolio, and basically the job is yours to lose. You get the job. So what I was looking for when I was like hiring artists is that I just want really good communication. And I want you to do what you say you're going to do. So if we agree that a deadline is on Friday, you're going to come to me on Friday with whatever it is that you are creating for me. Um, I I've seen the other side too. Like if you're a bad communicator, for example, I had one sculptor that I worked with, and the thing was due on Friday. He was supposed to come in. Friday came and went. We tried calling him. He wasn't there. The following week, he'd get in touch and says, "Oh yeah, sorry, this happened." Whatever it was that happened. I understand there's things that happen. You just need to communicate up front that it's happening, so you're not leaving us hanging. Needless to say, after a couple of times like that, we no longer worked with them. So as a professional, you do what you say you're going to do. You communicate, and it's as simple as that. Okay, so in 2006, I had a couple of really, really big life-changing things happen to me. One was that I had the absolute highest paying job of my life. It was a nice six-figure job, but the bad news is that it was the worst job I ever had in my life as well. So the huge lesson here was you cannot just chase the dollar. You cannot just chase the paycheck. You have to be in love with what you're doing. So this company, I also do design product development, managing the whole process, but it was a product that I hated. Honestly, I hated the product. The culture of the company was a terrible fit for me. Um, it was a horrible commute. I would leave the house to get there before my young daughter woke up, and I would often get home just as she was going to sleep or even after she went to sleep. So it was the worst job. The other thing that happened in 2006 was my oldest brother, who I was really close to, passed away suddenly and totally unexpectedly. And it was a complete, like, it was a gut punch. I never realized that a person could feel such physical pain from an emotional thing. Thankfully, several months go by and time heals everything, and you're left with wonderful memories. But those two things combined that happened right around the same time really made me look at what I was doing with my life, and how I got so far off that path I had when I was just getting out of college. And I've had several experiences, and I'm sure you have as well, where something has happened. You go, whoa, whoa, whoa! I got to really do what's important. I don't have time to mess around. That happens a lot, and it happened to me before. But after a couple months, after a year, you just slide into your old ways, your old BS, the way you used to do things, and all of a sudden you're caught back in that rat trap. This was different. This was completely different, and I knew that I needed to change. I'd always been interested in photography. I always had a point and shoot. I'd always go and shoot photos. And I had it in my head that I was going to be a professional photographer. I went and got my first SDSLR. It was a Canon Rebel XTI, and I was so excited. I went out and took photos with it. I got back to the computer. I put all the images in, and every single image was blurry. I could not believe it. It was like, oh my god, it's not going to be easy. This is definitely not like a point and shoot. There's going to be a huge learning curve. And true to that, I'm still learning to this very day. And that's what, 15 years later, 16 years later, I'm still learning. That never ends. And that's what really kind of keeps it interesting. When you're creative, there's always things to learn. So I started off as many photographers do when they first started off. I started doing headshots, corporate photography, lifestyle. Being in Los Angeles, I even shot a bunch of red carpets. In 2007 or so, 2008, I ended up starting to shoot weddings. And that's what I did for the next 7 or 8 years. I shot wedding after wedding, and probably a couple hundred weddings in all. And really, I actually enjoyed it. It was a lot of work. I learned a lot, and there was even an element of storytelling, which is really what I really yearned to get back to, was storytelling. And I found a bit of that through wedding photography. In 2015, my daughter was just entering high school. She was a competitive swimmer, and I realized that I only had 4 more years with her in the house before I figured she was going to leave and go to college, which she did. 4 more years. And the problem with shooting weddings is that they only happen on the weekends. So weddings are weekend killers, and I was missing so much of what was happening with my wife and my daughter. Every time I missed a swim meet or some event that she had, I died a little bit inside, you know. So I knew that 2015 was going to be the last year that I photographed weddings, and it was. I had the last wedding that I booked was a backyard wedding in November, and that was the last wedding I shot. What was I going to do? I had no idea. I had literally no idea. I just knew that I couldn't miss any more weekends. Serendipitously, right around the same time when I was thinking about this, I was on Facebook and I started seeing my nephew, Johnny. He was posting these images. Like I can still remember this one very clearly. It was an image of a Ninja Turtle action figure. And he was riding on a BMX bike and he was soaring across the sky, maybe between these canyon or something like that. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, first of all, I'm thinking, whoa, that is really cheesy. But beyond that, I'm thinking, how did he even do that? So in my mind, I'm thinking, was he throwing the toy across in the air, like throwing the toy in the air over and over until he got lucky enough to get it in camera, the shot that he wanted? And you know, now I know that's a really silly thought, really, really ridiculous. But having said that, a lot of people still think that's how a lot of the toy photography that they see happens. You know, before I forget, I just want to go back to my nephew Johnny. He's developed into like one of the most amazing toy photographers. If you want to check out his work on Instagram, it's Sergeant Bananas, SGTBANANAS. But he's the one that like opened my eyes to what the possibility is. So I just want to say that before I get into how I got into toy photography, I went from shooting Bridezilla, which was the weddings, to shooting Godzilla. And the change, I cannot tell you, was amazing. So I want to talk about storytelling, and that really begins my journey into toy photography. So I'd seen these images on Facebook that my nephew was doing, and he actually texts me and he says, "Hey, Uncle Mitch, you know what? Next time you come up to San Francisco, bring your camera, and I'm going to take you to a park, and we're going to go shoot some toys." I thought, sure, why not? I mean, why not? What do I have got to lose? It sounds fun. So it took me a while to get up there. It was maybe 3 months. 3 months later, I head up there. I bring my camera gear and I get together with Johnny. We head to a park. I didn't have any toys. I had all the gear, thankfully. And so he lends me a couple of stormtroopers. And this was actually the very, very first toy photo that I took. So I took these two stormtroopers and I set them up in the crook of a tree. And, you know, looking at these images now, 6 years later, it still holds up pretty well for me. I'm still pretty happy with it, especially since it was my very first experience shooting a toy. But there's some things that I see that I would totally do different. Like right now, I don't see much of a story being told. And if anybody knows me or knows my work, I really, really try to tell stories through my images. The other, like a really pet peeve that I have now is that, you know, it's those leaves. I'll be honest with you. Those leaves are huge. And if I'm doing it now, I would not have those leaves, or I wouldn't even be shooting in that location. But anytime you have something from real life that throws the illusion off and makes you, and it kind of brings you back to like, oh yeah, these are just 6-inch toys. You know, I really try to avoid that. So that's why hopefully you'll never see leaves. The only time leaves would work is with Toy Story, where they're actually toys in that position. But anyways, back to this image, first image, and literally from the very first click of that shutter, I had this feeling inside like, wow, this is like, you know, it has something to do with like, we all grew up playing with toys, right? It's universal. But the other thing that I felt was like, there's a career to be made here. Like I'm pretty sure that no one at the time, at least that I was aware of, that had a full-time career photographing toys. And I saw that opportunity like as clear as day. Like I could make a living out of shooting these toys. So I left, I went home, all excited about this new thing that I was going to get into, toy photography. I bought some toys and I went to a park about a half hour from my home. And I brought these troopers, these are scout troopers. I brought them to the park and I started setting them up in these really cool environments. So, you know, I look at these images now and you know how Picasso had his blue period? Well, I'm looking at these images now and it's really clear that I had my loitering period, where basically I had toys kind of loitering or just hanging out in really cool environments. They weren't doing much. They weren't telling me anything. They weren't telling a story. And in the end, I wasn't being impacted. I'm sure people weren't being impacted by them. So the next time I went back to that park, I was resolved that I wanted to tell some kind of story. And this is the image that I came up with. And for me, this was like, this was a breakthrough. This was a milestone because not only am I telling a story, but I'm telling it in a really dynamic way. I've got the falling trooper like caught in midair. And, the story is obviously, is it that his buddy up top pushed him off? I don't think so, because the way his arm is reaching down, he's obviously trying to save him. He's too late. So, when I'm thinking of the story, I'm thinking, okay, so was he too close to the edge and he slipped on some loose rocks and bam, that's the story right there, right? So I have the trooper kind of suspended in midair. What else can I do to kind of push that story along? Well, it's obviously having the rocks falling with him. So just a little background on how I create this image. It's like I have this, all of this is basically captured in camera in one, maybe two shots. So what you see is what you get. What I would use Photoshop for is to remove elements of the image that help support or create it. So in this case, there would be wire that was supporting the one falling trooper. So in Photoshop, I would remove that wire. What you don't see, obviously, is me. I shoot normally with a remote shutter release. It's a remote control, it's wireless. And I'm just off camera and I have a handful of pebbles and little stones and I'm throwing them into that scene. And the beauty of still photography is that if you use a fast enough speed, you're going to capture those stones just like they are. They're not going to have motion blur so that you're not going to see that they're actually traveling horizontally towards that. You're going to connect the dots in your head and you're going to see those stones falling because the trooper is falling. I mean, that's the story. So that was a huge image for me. I still think it holds up really well. And the next series of images are just kind of like really exploring storytelling and taking those images beyond toys, trying to create emotion and emotion. Telling stories.
I think this is the series where you caught my eye on Instagram and I started to see you were tagging us. And this is that period with the T-Rex
Awesome.
interrupting the bathroom break. I remember specifically.
Yeah, this is where I was really, that makes a lot of sense to me because I may have tagged you before on some of the loitering things. I may not have, I don't remember, but it's probably better if I didn't because those would not have made much of an impact on you, I'm pretty sure. So I'm glad that I started tagging you after I started telling these stories.
Yeah, I remember it was this one and one of a T-Rex looking in the mirror. No, it was like a small dino looking in the mirror.
Yeah, we're going to see that one in a little bit, actually.
Yes.
Yeah, but actually, so a lot of times you'll see me through toy photography showing characters in unexpected ways. And that's one of the ways that I can drive storytelling. Like, how can I tell a story? Oh, let me look at a character and see if there's something interesting that I can tell about them that people aren't familiar with. So in this case, it's the story that drove this, the idea that drove this is Darth Vader really a villain and cruel 24/7, or on his off hours or on the weekends, does he really like to enjoy life? So that's what really drove that image. This is an interesting image in that it taught me a lot. So some toy photographers like to recreate scenes, and that is what this is. It's a recreation. You're all familiar with it. It's Rafiki holding baby Simba off of Pride Rock, showing all the animals below that this is your future king, right? This is your future king. And this toy is just a fixed pose toy. It's basically a cake topper. And you can't move the positions, you can't move the arms or anything. What you see is what you get. Okay, so I created this image and it was fine. I'm happy enough with it. But I realized that I felt nothing when I looked at it. And I started analyzing why that was. And I figured out, I do believe it's because the movie came out around 1995. And The Lion King is not like most movies, or I should say the Disney movies aren't like most movies, because the Disney movies just are generational. Every new generation of kids discover them, they love them, they watch them. So I could safely say that almost everybody that's watching this webinar has probably seen The Lion King, whether you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, or if you're a teenager or if you're a kid, you've probably seen The Lion King. And having seen The Lion King, this is one of the most iconic scenes. So basically, I created an image of something that's everybody's seen like hundreds of times and is super familiar with it. So it was a huge learning thing. I mean, for me, I totally respect people wanting to recreate scenes. It could be super challenging from an accuracy standpoint, but for me, it's been there, done that. So I put this toy away for a while, not knowing what I'd do with it. A few months later, I had an idea, and that was this. Same toy, same position, totally different context. I added a Rancor from Star Wars, and instead of Rafiki showing everybody their future king, he's basically showing the Rancor his future snack, essentially. That was the idea behind it. And, you know, love it or hate it, I'm sure there's some people that really don't like it because Simba is such an adorable little lion cub there. Love it or hate it, I think most people would agree that this image has a way stronger impact than the one that I just showed you. And that's kind of the direction that I like to take. I want to make people feel something, whether that's humorous or shock or even disgust, you know, but I tend to veer towards the humorous a lot of times and sometimes towards just heartfelt emotion. This is another image. I know, Elizabeth, you put this on the Wacom site on Instagram yesterday, I think. And
Yeah, for Mother's Day.
this was created for Mother's Day. And I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that I don't often say that I'm the first to do anything, but I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that I'm the first person to create an image where the words were used by people saying, "Ah, that's so cute. That's adorable. Oh, I love that." And I'm gonna say I'm the first to create an image where those words were spoken with these alien xenomorphs, because more often than not, you know, the words that would be associated with these guys are fear, scary, disgusting, gross. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But I wanted to show them in more of a emotional mother and child moment, again for Mother's Day. Just to give you a little background on how I created this, as far as I know, there are no child xenomorphs available on the market. So what I did, I only had one at the time. And what I did was I posed the large mom there, as you see her with her left arm outstretched. There was nothing in there. And then I moved her over to this position and I posed her exactly as you see the little one here. I got it into Photoshop and I reduced the child down in size. But I think what the key is to making this kind of cute, and especially making the little juvenile cute, was that I just couldn't reduce the whole thing down to this size, because then it would just look like a miniature adult alien. I had to leave the head a little larger, because if you're familiar with like human anatomy, you know that little babies and kids have freakishly large heads compared to the rest of their bodies. And in order for them to be cute, and in order for this alien to be cute, I had to kind of capture that. So I think I'm pretty happy with the result, and judging by how other people reacted to it, I think it was a success. Sometimes ideas come from just observation. So this is Forky, who you can see I'm holding up right here, and he was like one of the main characters of Toy Story 4. I didn't know what to do with him. I had this toy sitting on my kitchen table, and I just started analyzing what and who he is. Okay, his name is Forky. Essentially, he's a spork. All right, so what is a spork? A spork is a spoon and a fork. And I just kept thinking about that, and it dawned on me, spoon and fork. And I ran over to a closet where we keep our plastic utensils. I grabbed that plastic fork and that plastic spoon, and as soon as I put them next to Forky, I just started laughing uncontrolled. It was so hilarious just to see it. I don't know if it was funny to anybody else, but when I laugh, I know that's an image I'm going to make. So, of course, the whole idea behind this was that Forky reunites with mom and dad.
I love it. I hadn't seen this one.
Yeah, it's just a fun image. Okay, so I just want to talk about my first clients. I kind of gave you my journey up to this point in weddings and how I was introduced to toy photography. So in 2015, I told you, August, I took my first toy photo. 2016, I spent almost the entire year just really kind of developing my style and learning the techniques and the effects that are unique to toy photography. Um, Somewhere around mid 2016, I became familiar with a toy company called I Am Elemental Toys. And I was really impressed with their toys because it was an all female action figure line. The proportions were more natural, they weren't exaggerated like so many other female action figures are. And Julie Kerwin, who's the founder of this company, really wanted to have these action figures for girls as well as boys sitting alongside the other action figures in the toy aisle at then Toys R Us or Walmart or wherever. And having a young daughter, or having a daughter, I should say, I wish these were around when she was younger because I totally would have bought these for her. So I reached out to her, I sent her an email, said, hey, I'm Mitch, this is what I do. I'd love to collaborate and create some images for you. This company was relatively new at the time, so she responded, yeah, I love your work, not yet. And several times throughout the year, I did that. I reached out to her again, saying, hey, just touching base, wondering if you're ready, not yet. Finally, towards the end of 2016, I again emailed her. I said, I'd love to work. She goes, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. So first campaign created for this company. She's the very first person that took a chance on me. She saw something in myself and my work that perhaps nobody had to that point. And that first client means a lot. For me, it kind of validated, yes, I can do this. I can do this professionally. I can go out there, I can get clients, I can make money doing this. So it sends you out there with more confidence to go ahead and seek out your next clients. Early 2017, I really hit the ground running. I noticed on Instagram that a Mattel page called Ever After High, they started following me. When I saw that, within 5 minutes, I sent them a DM and I said, I didn't know who it was. I just knew that they started following me. I said, hey, you know what? I'm Mitch, I'm a toy photographer. I would love to talk to you about exploring opportunities and creating some cool images of your product line. Within 5 minutes, I had a DM back from Mattel, and long story short, I got a 1-year contract with them. Just like that. It was just from Instagram. So I'm not saying that you will find a lot of clients on Instagram, but it's definitely possible. And my second client year contract was through this Instagram. So Ever After High, I'm really kind of getting out of my comfort zone here because up until now I've been shooting 6-inch plastic action figures, and these were 12-inch fashion dolls. They have real hair, they have fabric clothes, different animal altogether than what I was shooting, but I was totally down with it. I wanted to create stories. I wanted to create images. This was one of the first ones I created. So I created a bunch of these images, and then Mattel came back to me and said, we have this line called Monster Minis. We want you to create a bunch of images using, so the assignment usually came in like, okay, it's summertime. We want summer themes. In this case, we want you to create a water park with these characters. So when you see like images through my Instagram, my portfolio, 9 times out of 10, they're created on my patio in my backyard. I literally just like pour water onto my stone patio, and however I dress out the scene, whether it's with rocks like this and these handmade flags, or if it's whatever it is, I can create a water park, I can create a river with rapids, I can create an ocean with waves, I can create a really calm lake. It's amazing that I can create almost environment that I want on this stone patio. So I created a bunch of images here, and then Mattel again comes back to me and they say, hey, Mitch, we have this line, they're called Uno. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Uno cards. They're one of the most popular card games around. And she says, we'd love for you to create some images off of these. And I'm thinking to myself, whoa, time out. I get the dolls, I get the little plastic toys. Those are toys. I'm a toy photographer. These aren't even toys. This is a game. These are cards. They're, I don't know, are they 3-dimensional? For me, they're if they are, they're super flat. They're basically really flat pieces of paper. Of course I said yes. For me, again, I felt there's a lot of stress when I went into this because I'd never shot anything like this. But in my head, I know that if I can find the story to tell, then that's the main challenge, and I can problem solve my way to the final image. And this is the first image that I created with them. My wife, thank you, Rachel. I know you're watching this. She created these beautiful origami swans out of the cards. The idea was to have them flying out of this bird cage, which I bought at a craft shop. and almost like setting your creativity free, having fun with Uno. And when I saw this image, when I finally finished it, it was like I felt as much satisfaction and excitement seeing this image as any Star Wars image that I did or any Toy Story image that I did. This was right up there with it. And it totally validated for me that the story is the most important thing for me. It's not the toy, it's not the game, it's what story can I tell from it. And that's the theme that is always going through my work, is hopefully that I'm telling a story. This is another image that I created. They wanted me to show the waterproof nature of these cards. And instead of showing it next to a pool, I really wanted to kind of convey like a Saturday night family game night. The kid gets excited, he jumps out of his chair, he won the game, he hits the table, the milk goes flying, the cookies go flying, it goes all over the cards, but hey, it's okay. These cards are waterproof, they're milk proof, they're beer proof, they're whiskey proof, whatever you're drinking, they're proof of whatever it is. And just another example of having a really fun story to get the message across.
Oh my God, Mitch. I have so many questions about that image. I can't wait to ask you some questions.
You want to ask him now?
That milk, I mean, what was that? Was that actually milk?
Yeah, instead of going through this, I have something where I can answer it perfectly just down the road, just a bit.
All right,
So
great.
hold
I'll let
tight.
you
Here
go
we go.
on. I'll let you go
All
on.
right. Okay, so this brings me to like niche and differentiation. So toy photography is, as you can imagine, a super tight niche. And I can almost not imagine a tighter niche to be in. So there's niche and differentiation. And as creatives, I'm going to strongly and highly recommend that you try to find one of those, if not both of those, in your work, because it's going to make a huge difference to your career. Okay, so you know what a niche is. Toy photography is my niche. This is what I consider a differentiation. So here we have competitive swimmers, which I do not consider a niche. It's a really popular sport. Okay, what is a differentiation in this case is this creature here in the middle. He's got so much differentiation from these other swimmers. He's got this slick, scaly skin, which is going to help him glide through the water effortlessly. He's got webbed hands and webbed feet, which is going to add to his propulsion through the water. It's going to help push him through the water. And lastly, he's got these gills, which allows him to swim forever under the water. He's not even going to need to come up for a breath. So he's got a huge advantage. Although I know my daughter, who's right here, will be the first off the block and into the water faster than this guy, and probably faster than any of these swimmers. As soon as this creature hits the water, he's going to start taking off. He's going to build a lead, and that lead's going to continue to grow until he wins the race. This creature has a strong differentiation among these other competitive swimmers. So again, in your work, you want to look for finding a niche that you can like dominate if possible, or at least you want to find a differentiation. Ideally, you want to find both, which leads to being an asset versus a commodity. Niche and differentiation, or the lack of, will completely determine which of these you're going to be. Are you going to be an asset, or are you going to be a commodity? So I told you earlier that I was a wedding photographer for 7 or 8 years, shot hundreds of weddings. And I still look at my wedding photography images, and I just think they're strong. I'm not going to be, forget modesty. I think I was a pretty good wedding photographer. I told stories to the images, and I know that my clients, when they look at them in 10 or 20 years, that they're gonna look back, and it's gonna bring them back right to the day that they got married, which ultimately is the goal for these wedding photos. But at the same time, wedding photography is probably one of the most competitive genres in photography. And I look back now and I realize that I was in the most competitive price range of the most competitive genre of photography. So when a client or a potential client would come to meet with me and look at my work, they'd love my work, they'd get my prices. I knew that when they left, that they were probably going to meet with 3 or 4 other wedding photographers and check out their prices. And based on prices, they'd probably book me or them. Sometimes they would come back to me and say, oh, you know what, we love your work. And if you can drop your price to this, we'd be happy to have you shoot our wedding. And being a commodity, you really have no power in the negotiation. So more often than not, I would say, sure, you know what, I'll drop my price, let's do this. So the thing about being a commodity is you have very little say in your pricing structure, what you can demand for your own well-being through a job. It's you have very, you're basically. I felt like I was one of these guys. Okay, I know these aren't wedding photographers. These guys are probably shooting sports, but this is how I felt. I felt like I was one of these guys, one of many doing very similar work. Like I can imagine if they're shooting tennis or whatever it is, how different can their shots be? They're all using huge lenses. But having said that, there's probably one or two guys in this group that are going to sell way more photos of this sporting event than others. And why is that? It's because somehow they've created a differentiation between the others. And that could be their service, it could be their rates, it could be a number of things, but somehow they are setting, one or two of these guys are setting themselves apart from all the rest of them, and they're going to get the lion's share of the business. So again, differentiation can make the difference if you are working in a highly competitive arena, wherever it is. So know your value. And it's one thing to know your value, it's another thing to get your value. So the one message that I really want anybody that's listening to this webinar to take away from today is that you need to find that niche. You need to find that way to differentiate yourself, because until you do, you may think you know your value, but you're going to have a hard time getting that value. You're going to have a hard time getting clients to really value what you do, which leads to this image, what Elizabeth was referring to earlier. Everybody has like an inner strength. If you're like me, you're kind of geeky and goofy looking on the outside, like Rex is, but in the inside, you have this strength that if you know how to tap into it, you can really do what you want to do. You can get to where you want to get. You can create what you want to create. If you're like me, it's going to be, it could be a long path, you know, it could be this winding road, but eventually you're going to get there. Elizabeth was telling me that a lot of the people that may be watching this are younger. They could be students, or you're young in your career. I've heard people in their 30s and 40s almost give up because they feel like it's too late to do anything. Okay, guys, when I discovered toy photography, I was in my early 50s, all right? So I don't want to even hear anything about that. It's like age doesn't matter. It's like, I feel like I'm just getting, I have friends who are talking about retiring soon. And I just look at them and I'm going, that's so awesome for you. But for me, I feel like I'm just getting started. I feel like I finally found what I'm supposed to do with my career. You know, it's like, this is what I'm going to do. I have so much creative energy that I can see doing this. I can't even see not doing this at this point. So just find your inner strength, find that niche, find that way to differentiate yourself, and amazing things will happen. Because I found a niche, I've been able to work with some of the most incredible clients that up until now I had no idea, no dream that I could ever work for. So of course, as you can imagine, I work for a lot of the big toy companies. I work for Hasbro, Mattel, companies called Schleich, Moose Toys, Spin Master, Jazzwares. But part of the surprising thing about finding a niche is the other clients that I've had, which I never expected. And it's like the large entertainment studios, the Walt Disney Company, Marvel, Funimation, who is owned by Sony Pictures. Funimation is an awesome company. They do anime stuff. Disney Plus. So many surprises have come from working in a niche. There's this guy that I listen to. His name is Blair Enns, E-N-N-S, and he shares a lot of information that I totally believe in on pricing, how you price yourself, but more importantly, how important it is to find a niche, how to specialize, how important it is to differentiate. And he says, like, most people are really afraid to find a tight niche, to commit to a niche, because they're afraid they're going to get bored. They're going to be doing the same thing day in and day out. You feel like you open this door and all you see is a bunch of sameness, boring sameness. But he says, what really happens is when you find a niche, you open this door, and what do you find inside that door? You find 12 more doors, and each one leads to something different. So you open another door, and that leads to something else. And as crazy as that sounds, that's exactly what I've experienced. So I just want to go through a couple of things that, like, I never could have expected in my wildest dreams. One of them is participating in a documentary called Marvel 616. And you can, if you have Disney Plus, you can stream this. This was just something out of the blue. I was just working and I get a call, and it was a person that asked me, hey, you know, we found you and we'd love for you to participate in this documentary. It's going to be about all things Marvel, including toys. And that's the episode I'm in. It's episode 6. It's called Unboxed. I created this image here for the key art, which was used to promote this image, promote this episode. To me, it's just mind blowing that I was even considered to be in this. This is a behind the scenes shooting in my backyard. Finished image that you just saw right here that ended up being this image. Another thing that was just out of the blue, I was asked to participate in Toy Fair New York last year in 2020. I was asked to cut the ribbon, the opening ribbon. And I'm sharing the stage with Shaquille O'Neal. There's only a 2-foot height difference between us. We're almost the same height, just 2 feet difference. But totally mind blowing when I look at this. And it was, again, it's risk taking. I was contacted. I was asked to, this was not risk taking. Just getting up on the stage and cutting a ribbon was just fun. But I was asked to go and exhibit a lot of my work. I was asked to speak in front of a large audience. And when I first got that invitation, I sat on that invitation for a month or two because I couldn't wrap my head around it. It's like, no, I'm not a speaker. This is not what I do. A month or two later, I just, you know, the person who contacted me, her name is Marianne Bassard. She basically heads up the whole event. I talked to her again, and she convinced me that I should do this. It'd be amazing. And so I did. And this is just like a real quick video recap of what that was.
Hi, my name is Mitchell Wu. I'm a toy photographer from Los Angeles, California. I have a 70-image gallery upstairs here at Toy Fair. It was such a pleasure to compile all of these images. It made me go back through the last few years and really analyze the stories that I have told, and then to be able to share them with everybody at Toy Fair is a dream come true. One of the favorite images I have would be a more recent one I did of the Mandalorian throwing the child, aka Baby Yoda, up into the air, kind of reinforcing the relationship of almost like a father and child, and I love how it turned out. The whole goal behind my toy photography is to tell stories, creating dynamic images, and really trying to get the people that look at it to feel some kind of emotion and be impacted somehow by that. Hi, I'm Mitchell Wu from Mitchell Wu Toy Photography, and welcome to Fun City.
Yeah, that was an incredible experience, and kind of being at Toy Fair and this Marvel documentary, it kind of started a snowball that was already rolling, and almost turned it into a blizzard. It was just an amazing experience and has led to so much since then. Another thing that was unexpected. Okay, so you know that I worked at Disney for 6 years. When I started shooting toys, I had a toy photography bucket list, and on that bucket list was to create images for the Walt Disney Company. I reached out to them numerous times over the course of a couple of years, and I kept hitting a dead end. I basically gave up. Then in 2019, out of the blue, I was contacted by Disney, and they said they wanted me to create a series of images for the release of Toy Story 4. So this was one of the images I created for them. It shows Duke Kaboom on the motorcycle kicking over a glass of milk. He's not doing it out of spite or being mean. He's actually helping Forky. He's getting that milk onto that cookie. But this is a really fun image, and it's one that still remains one of my favorites. And Elizabeth did have some questions on how I created that milk splash, and this is exactly how I created it. I just took some compressed air and I blasted the milk, and I captured the splash in camera. But I want to show you this is a cool behind the scenes, because I want to show you how little that I leave up to chance. Anything that I can control in the image, I will. So if you look here at the base of the motorcycle, you can see this little wire. That holds the position of the motorcycle in exactly the right angle that I want. Here at the bottom of the glass of milk, I have another wire holding the cup at the exact angle that I want. Even these little cookies down here that you see are kind of being like jostled about because of the movement, they're all propped up on tiny little wires at exactly the angle that I want. Same with Forky's foot here. He's just elevated off of the wood just a little bit, and that's through that wire. So the only thing that I couldn't control is the splash of the milk. I just love working with liquids, partly because there's always that unknown factor. You don't know what you're going to get. You can get something amazing. Well, I'm just going to say I'm going to get something amazing because I always take so many photos. If you're lucky, you get the shot the first time. But more often than not, I'm taking a dozen or more shots. And, each time you need to reset, refill, kind of clean up the scene. So it's very time consuming. But what usually ends up happening after I get all the shots taken, I get them to the computer, I see one shot that has maybe 85% of the splash that I want. Okay, here's the splash that I wanted again. I find one that has 85% of the splash, and then I'll go to one of the other photos I saw, and I'll find that other missing percentage, and I'll composite that in until I get the perfect splash that I want. Why do I put so much emphasis on my splashes? In this image and in most of my other images, whether it's a splash or some kind of effect, an explosion, I really place a lot of importance on them because they're not just there as eye candy. I consider like this splash as the third character in this image. I mean, it's a really important aspect of the image because it's really supporting and helping tell the story. But yeah, so that's how I create these images. It's, again, they're mostly practical effects, and I just would remove, the straw here and maybe my hand out in Photoshop later on. Elizabeth, have any questions?
How many times did you have to do the splash for you to get the right one?
Yeah, so probably on this one, on average, I probably did at least 20 shots of this with the different splashes. Quite a
And Mitch,
few.
do you always work with real food? Like, are those real cookies? Is that real milk, or do you sometimes use alternative, materials like?
Yeah, more often than not, they're real. I mean, I have some like I guess they're plastic fruit that I've used from time to time, and but yeah, for these most of my shots, it's real. Like for sure, this is real. This is actually more of a cream. It's heavier, so I think it really kind of helped. And it's not because I planned on it. It's just what I had in my refrigerator at the time. But you get a nice splash with it.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, it's fun. It's a process, but it's fun.
I thought you were gonna say something crazy like, that's actually glue, Elizabeth. Like what? Because I've seen some food photographers take photos of food and it's not really food.
I've seen those toy food photographers are really they're really tricky with what they do. I've seen some of their videos. I'm going, wow, that is amazing. That's some pretty
But
cool
food's
stuff
really
that they
hard.
do.
Yeah, imagine. Yeah.
Actually, like
Ice
syrup
cream.
on pancakes. I think they use like oil, like motor oil or something. I saw in one photographer doing. It was pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Shireen is a food photographer. She knows all the tricks.
What? I didn't even know that, Shireen.
I am a
crazy.
newer food photographer. Well, I was just wondering, Mitch, so when you spray the milk everywhere, obviously it's going to fall down on that wood. How do you clean that up? Because, the wood kind of shows that wet texture after. I'm just dying to know how you do that.
That's such a good question, and I'm glad you asked. Okay, so even though I do shoot this dozens of times, I take that first shot when everything is clean so that I can basically composite. Basically, I erase the mess that's on the table, leaving just the pre-shot table. So it's all dry and clean, basically. You get that?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very smart.
But otherwise, that
Awesome.
would be a problem because the wood have been all wet and literally it would have taken me forever to dry and clean everything out. So.
Right. That's smart. I'm going to remember that.
Good question. Yeah. So this image went on to have a couple of different lives. And as a creator, you can wait for opportunities to come to you, or if you're like me, you can go out and find those opportunities. So for the longest time, I've been wanting to get featured on an in-flight magazine, whether it's United Airlines, Southwest Airlines, Delta, because it's going out to the people that see those, they're travelers, they're of all kinds of demographics. You have business people, you have people that work in the entertainment industry, you have every type of person you could imagine. And so those are the kind of people that I want to have my work exposed to, because I find that a lot of opportunities can grow from those situations. I reached out to all those airlines, and what I heard back was crickets, which was nothing. In 2019, my kid graduated from high school. She wanted to go to Asia for her graduation. We took her to Asia. And while I was on the flight to Taiwan, I reached into the front seat pocket in front of me, and I grabbed the in-flight magazine out, and I noticed that they had an artist feature in the magazine doing a little research, I realized that they feature an artist or creator in each issue of their magazine. So as soon as I got to Taiwan, I found a couple of names I thought might be the people I should email, sent out a couple of emails proposing what I thought would be amazing collaboration. I really just wanted to be featured in the magazine. I didn't even dream that I would get a cover. They got right back to me, and this was the result of just kind of looking for opportunities. This was the cover image on Voyage magazine, which is the EVA Airlines in-flight magazine, seen by millions of people. This magazine issue right here was, they did like 850 magazine prints of this, went into all the airplanes, went into their hotels, went into their tour buses. It was seen by well over 1 million people. Okay, this just brings me to something like, everybody loves social media. I know I love social media. I think the trap that a lot of people fall into is that they want to promote themselves through social media. They forget that there's a whole world outside of social media, like of traditional print, magazines, newspapers. You've got television, you've got PBS, you've got your local newspapers. And I've always been aware of that. And I've always focused as much on that side of the features as I have in social media. And I think that, like, while my social media following is, it's moderate, I would say I'm probably above average in my Instagram followers and Facebook. By no means do I have the most. There's people who have far more followers than I do. But I think I can safely say that outside of social media, there's no toy photographer who gets more features or more. I'm just out there. I'm really in different countries. I've been in different country newspapers. I've been in the UK, a lot of newspapers there. So really just try to focus on everything that's at your disposal, not just on social media. When you get these kind of features, you include your website, and everything just goes towards SEO, which pushes your website into a better place in the Google ranking. So always think about that. Another magazine cover. I do love magazine covers. And that was, when I look back at where kind of like my dream was when I got to art school, I feel like what I'm doing now is so close to what I imagined myself doing as an illustrator. And the way that digital technology has kind of blended photography and illustration, I feel like I'm kind of like living that life that I originally imagined myself living. This was for Schleich USA, a toy company. It was a 1-year contract. Really cool idea of taking kids' ideas, and then I would take them and create toy photos out of them. This is a couple of behind the scenes videos, and then I'm just going to scroll through some of my favorite images, and then I'm going to wrap it up.
Yeah, so people want you to see some behind the scenes shots of you.
Yeah, here we go.
Lights. Creating atmosphere with atmospheric aerosol. Dirt and debris for motion. Creating the unexpected.
That's one. These are really simple setups. This one was a little more complex. I don't know if any of you have seen the Netflix series called The Queen's Gambit. That series made such a huge impact on me. I had to go out and buy this.
I loved it.
I know. It was amazing. It was amazing. In fact, I watched it twice, once with my wife and then once when my daughter came home from college. It was just cool. But I actually went out and bought this chess set just so I could create this image. That's the Black Widow from Marvel. But yeah, these are just some fun, action-packed. This is a good example of dirt and debris effect. Again, similar to how I create the water splash. I just blast the dirt with compressed air.
So I always thought for some reason that you had your wife or somebody helping you, but you're saying that you use a remote shutter and you're always by yourself. Is that true?
Yes, that is true. In the very first video that I showed before I started speaking, my daughter was helping with some spray, but that was only because I don't know, I wanted to get her in that little documentary basically. But yes, I work alone, and it's all possible with that remote shutter release. I can be at the scene, I can be throwing or blowing up the dirt like you see here, and shooting off the camera at the same time. It's worked out pretty well for me. I enjoy working that way. I mean, I don't have to try and, I mean, I guess it would be great to have an assistant, but in my mind, it's like, I know exactly what I want to create and how I want the dirt to fall, how the milk will splash. And, it's like, honestly, it's fun. It's fun to do this stuff. So it's one of the reasons why I don't sit in front of a computer and create a lot of these effects digitally. First of all, I'm not that talented at digital effects, but more importantly, um, it's just more fun to get out there and splash stuff and set off fireworks, create explosions, and to throw dirt around to create these effects. And I also think it's a much better show, which is kind of why it's been picked up by various documentaries. Whereas if I was sitting in front of a computer screen and creating these effects, I'm not sure that I would get these same opportunities. But yeah, working alone is good because my wife has her life. She teaches ceramics at a college, so she's got her life going on. My kid's off at college, and it's just me, myself, and I. So that's the way it's worked, and I don't think I could at this point. I don't think I'll be changing that.
Come on, Mitch. I'm sure there's a lot of people here who want an internship there.
I don't know about that, but I will. But I always say that, like, I think I told you, it's like I'll either come up there and shoot, or you come down here and watch me shoot. And I'm gonna have you blast some milk, and I'm gonna have you throw some dirt for me. That'd be fun.
That'd be really fun.
Yeah. This was just a cool image that I don't even know how I think about some of these things, but it was a matter of, in Toy Story, there's these little aliens and there's the claw. They always look for the claw to take them out of that one arcade game, and they're going, the claw. And so I just want to do a literal translation of that in this image. And I still feel a little uneasy when I look at this. Almost, to me, it almost looks like a nightmare, but ultimately you have these little aliens at the bottom, so it's still a fun image.
And they're so happy to be clawed away. Look at them.
Yes.
I love it.
This
It's
is a really
great.
recent one. I mean, trying to think beyond the storyline of the Iron Giant, like, you know what? He walks around, there's always people around. This is bound to happen, right? This is just bound to happen at some point. He's bound to step on people, not on purpose, but
That's hilarious. How did you make those? Are those people different toys that you just?
they're like actually that size. They're super tiny. They're like people that are into train models and stuff. They buy
Oh, they're
like,
inside. Okay,
yeah, they
they're
buy these
miniature.
guys for their environments. But yeah, they're
Gotcha.
perfect size for this.
Looks perfect.
Mitch, we have someone asking what lens and f-stop you're using for these images.
Yeah, so I would say that 90% of what they're seeing here is shot with my 135 millimeter. It's a Canon. It's a 135 millimeter f2, and I usually shoot these at f2, which means I could focus it. Like if you look at this image, you can see that the squished people on the shoe are really sharp. But then even if you go back to his hands and especially his face, it's blurrier. So f2 allows you to keep a really tight focus on something, and then it draws people's eyes to that, and the rest can get softer beyond that to whatever degree you want, depending on the f-stop. But generally, it's f2 for me. And people, I think because, again, I came into toy photography from wedding photography, so I had all of the gear. I didn't go out and buy any new lenses for this. But most people who are starting out and who build their kit for toy photography, 9 times out of 10, they're going to end up getting a 100 millimeter macro lens, which probably makes a lot of sense. But for me, it's like, I have this lens, I'm going to use it. And also the extra 35 millimeters, the 135, it allows me to get back further from the set, because, I'm creating so much fire and explosions and splashes that, I don't want my camera right next to it. So a longer lens is actually better for this kind of stuff that I do. So yeah, I use a Canon R6. It's a mirrorless camera, but I'm going to say that this was taken with the R6, but the R6 is so new that most of the images that we're seeing here today was taken with my wedding camera, which is the Canon 5D Mark III.
Perfect.
Another just observation. I never really realized that Roz from Monsters Inc. Has a striking resemblance to Jabba the Hutt. You see that?
Oh my God, yes. That's crazy.
Yeah. And this was obviously the image that we used on the promotions for this webinar. And I had these toys, again, they're almost like cake toppers. They were sitting on my desk for the longest time. I couldn't figure out what to do with them. They sat on my desk so long that the seasons changed. It went from winter to spring, and I get allergies. My eyes started itching, they turned red, and bam, I had my idea. I knew that it had to do with Mike Wazowski's One Big Red Eye. Well, it wasn't red. I tinted it red in Photoshop, but that's how this image came to be.
Mitch, I'm noticing different backgrounds in your images. Are those, backgrounds that you create, or is that your literal kitchen?
Yeah, it's a good question. Most of these backgrounds are created, again, in my backyard, on my porch, in the house. This one actually is one of the few that I used a diorama on. So it's a cardboard fold out diorama, and you can collapse it back and put it back in its box when you're done, basically. So.
Awesome. Somebody's also asking us, Mitch, how do you plan a scene? Is there a drawing or mock-up phase?
For my personal work, it all comes together in my head, and then I take that out and I start creating the set, and I find the pose and the positioning, the composition that works best for whatever was in my head. For client work, that's exactly what I do. I will create a concept sketch, and I will have the client approve that before I even start setting up the actual set and get into photography. I need my shots to be approved at the concept level, because once I get into photography, it's too late. After the fact, if they come back to me and say, how about putting the character over here, or can we add this? At that point, it's probably going to be a reshoot, and I'm going to charge my entire fee over again. It's going to take longer. So everything gets approved at concept. And I started out by doing concept sketches because, going back to my Illustrator skills. But what I find now that works best and it's quickest is if I do like a really quick setup in my office, and the general posing, take some iPhone photos, and basically throw in a quick background, maybe even stock imagery, and just kind of run that by the client. They have a really good idea of what it's going to be. Obviously, it'll change a little in final, but it leaves very little to the imagination when I do it that way, which is really key, I think.
We have a question, Mitch, from Paul.
Hey, Paul.
Paul says, the greatest hobby in the world comes with its downs. Those creative blocks can knock somebody clean off their perch. So how would you ever deal with walls, if you ever get them, that can stop us on our tracks?
Yeah, so I think it's different depending on what type of creator you are, and especially what type of art you create. So if you're a graphic designer or you're a digital illustrator, I think my answer is going to be completely different than maybe what yours might be. But for me, I think that, if I'm feeling a creative block, it's really simple. I'm going to buy some different toys. I'm going to get new toys. And when I get those new toys, it's just going to inspire me. In fact, when I get a new toy, I can hardly wait to shoot it, because new ideas come from those toys. It's a really simple answer, but for me, that's really what works. But if I were to look at it from a different perspective, and maybe my budget's tight, I don't want to buy new toys at this time. The things that like my wife and I always like to do is, especially before the pandemic hit, but we can start doing it again now pretty soon, is go to museums, go to galleries, go see movies, go to the theater, like go see a stage show, just go out for a walk in a different environment than what you're used to. So for me, that might be in downtown LA, just different stimulus and being exposed to different things, for me also can generate a lot of ideas and creative energy.
Thank you, Mitch.
Yeah.
Andres has another question, and I saw it earlier in another place. Is there a reason you don't erase the joints on the toys' extremities when editing the photos?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And it's not a question that I ask myself, because I know exactly why I don't do it. Let's see if there's a joint here. like these guys. Clearly you can see like these lines here, here. For me, this is toy photography. And there's two words in that, keywords, obviously. One is toy and one's photography. I don't really try to escape the fact that what I'm photographing are toys. Again, like what drew me to this whole art form is the fact that I'm photographing toys, you know? It's what I played with as a kid. It's what you played with as a kid. And unless there's some obviously flaw that's not supposed to be there, maybe it happened in the production process or when it was shipping, I could correct that, no problem. But if it's the joints or the articulation, you know, the articulation joints or whatever these lines are for, maybe it's a mold line, I generally leave those in because to me, I'm not trying to hide the fact that these are toys. And that's it in a nutshell. These are toys and I like to portray them as toys. This, I just wanted to show you because, okay, so this is Wally and I bought this character. He doesn't come with a fire extinguisher, which is crazy because the fire extinguisher is used in a couple of really iconic scenes in the movie. And so I used my Wacom tablet, I used Photoshop, and I painted these using Photoshop, using my Wacom pen tool. And I'm hoping that people will just think that's part of the toy and not realize that it was something that I actually illustrated or drew in there. What do you
I
think,
didn't know it
Elizabeth?
was an illustration. How about you guys in the chat? I think you did a good job.
Yeah, thank you. I wish there were more opportunities to do that. I just don't have that many. Like, there's some things that I will draw in, like if there's a swing and I don't want to deal with a rope, sometimes I'll just draw one in. You know, some things that like probably people wouldn't notice and don't even need to know that it was done. I just let it go as part of the image. But this one I was kind of proud of just because it was more than I'd done on any other image. So it was just fun.
Well, we thought it was a toy. Great job.
Thank you. Current events can influence my images. This was obviously
Oh my
inspired
God. The
inspired by
quest
that.
for TP last year.
Can you believe that? That was so ridiculous. I still don't quite understand what drove that, but it was so pervasive throughout our society that no one could find toilet paper that I had to
And
create.
pasta, Mitch. Don't forget, people were also hoarding pasta.
I didn't know that.
You have to do something with spaghetti. Yeah, it happened. You
If I
couldn't
knew
find
that, I would have
pasta.
done. I did an image about that too.
Candy,
Yeah.
because everybody was baking bread.
Oh yeah. Everybody was flour and pasta were commodities last year.
Wow.
Crazy.
Wow. Wow. Well, I'm glad this is over, but I still have this image to remember it by. Just a fun image. One of
I
my
love
favorite
this one.
images.
We used that one for our Facebook cover for spring.
Yeah, that's right. You did.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just a little background on this image. I didn't have a plant, a real live plant that would work for this. So I used one of my plastic leaves, one of my plastic plants, and I shot this on my porch. So the blurry background is just the bushes that I have back there, just totally blurred out from the lens that I was telling about earlier. And I have a little syringe that I put water in. I just shot it out of view at the top of this leaf and let it stream down and just caught it in camera like this.
Mitch, you always use natural light, or do you also enhance and help with?
Yeah, I would say that more often than not, I'm using. I have these lights. They're called Lytra lights. They're little LED lights, and I use those because I do use a lot of natural light. I usually use these to create like a rim light around the character, so it'll pop more, or just as fill to kind of lighten up some of the shadows that might be on the other side of the main light. But yeah, I do use a lot of light. And sometimes I'll use them, like the lights will be key to the image. Like I'll put gels on them, color gels, and I'll create entire moods and environments using the lights that way. So it depends on the image, but normally, yes, I will use some sort of external lighting.
Paul has another question that I was also wondering. Mitch, if you had to throw away all your toys forever except one, which one would you keep and why?
What a cruel question.
I know, how mean, but I'm curious. That's mean because you're a toy photographer. If you had to photograph only one toy forever in different scenes, which one?
Yeah, so I'm gonna say it might be Woody from Toy Story, or it might be the Iron Giant. Woody would be great just because, again, he's a toy. He's supposed to be a toy, so he can work in almost any situation that you put him in around the house. You don't have to worry about things. If he's like, I've had pictures of him with beer bottles or with appliances from around the house, and it's not a matter of trying to scale him to that. He's already in scale to that because he's a toy. Iron Giant because it's just an amazing movie. You know, all these, a lot of what you see here is based on nostalgia for me. And not so much from what I grew up with, but more from what my kid grew up with. So my daughter and I would watch Toy Story dozens of times together. Iron Giant, we've seen so many times. So a lot of my decisions will be made sort of based on the toy, but also like on the memories that I have of them. So Iron Giant would be it'd be a toss up between Woody and Iron Giant. How's that? I narrowed it down to 2.
That's great. I'm gonna put Paul on the spot and ask him to reveal to the chat which one he would pick.
Yes,
Oh.
please do. And he
Let us
better.
know.
He better.
Yeah, so
And
we
I
have a
think
few more
that's
questions, but I know
cool.
that we've kept you now for an hour and a half almost. I'm only gonna hit maybe two or three more questions. How are we doing on Facebook? Shireen, are there any questions over there?
We're doing good. Somebody's just asking Mitch if you could mention the name of the lights again that you use.
Yes, they're called Litra lights, Litra, and they are amazing because the build quality, they have all aluminum housing, so they're essentially indestructible, and they're waterproof. So in some of my shots, I actually put them underwater and I put colored gel on them to create a really cool watery mood. And they also have little magnets on the back. So if you have something like a metal sheet that you want to put it on to position it, you could do that too. So Litra lights, Litra. For me, they're okay. So there's been several pieces of gear that have been game changers to me. One are these lights, because anytime you get a new piece of gear that actually inspires you to create something new and different that you haven't done before, you know that's an amazing product. And that's what these lights have done for me. And not because this webinar is being sponsored by Wacom, but I can tell you one of the hugest game-changing tools for me was my Wacom tablet. I'm assuming that most of you use it because you're here, but I actually started using it in my wedding photography days and to edit things, but especially now with toy photography, because I'm doing so much erasing and even painting like you saw. To do that with a mouse is just absolutely ridiculous. And it's tough on the wrist to use a mouse. Switching to the pen tool was such a game changer, and it allowed me to push my creativity even further. So again, a tool that allows you to push your creativity even further is something that you should definitely be using. And the third thing that's been a game changer for me is this new camera that I got that I was talking about earlier, which is the Canon R6. It's my first mirrorless camera. It's got this screen on the back that pulls out. It's an articulated screen. It's touch screen, so you can control all the exposure, everything from the screen, almost like an iPhone screen. And what that meant for me is that I can be looking at this screen tilted up. Normally for a toy photographer, you want to shoot at the toy's level. And for me, that often meant on the ground. I'd set up stuff on the ground all the time. I'd have to lay on the ground. I'd have to, in my older camera, I'd have to, kind of break my neck to be laying on the ground and looking through the viewfinder of the camera. Now I can be kneeling down, I can be sitting down, I could be on a stool and just be looking at that viewfinder. The viewfinder is also covered with, it's totally covered with focus points. So no matter where my toy is, if it's in the far corner of the screen, if it's in the middle, if it's down below, there's always a focus point that I could put right on its head, right on its face. And that's not true with a lot of older cameras. You had big blank spots where there was no focus points, and that created a real challenge. I mean, you could work around it, but it took time. So definitely, those are the 3 game-changing tools that I've used over the years.
Thank you.
That's amazing.
Everyone's really thankful in the chat too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And just so that we're clear, because a lot of people may be wondering which tablet you use.
I'm using the Intuos Pro, and it's the medium size. I also have the, I don't know, I forget what it's called. You can tell me.
Called
It's
the
the
Mobile Studio Pro.
It's the all-in-one, and
yeah,
I broke it out for a little while,
testing
and
it.
yeah, I broke it out for a little while, and I was amazed for it. But I've been so busy, I haven't had the time to devote to really hopping on it and learning more about it. But my initial impression was amazing, so I can't wait to like spend more time and really
Yeah.
figure out how to work that to its full capacity.
Thank you for testing that for us. So Mitch is an Intuos Pro user. Are you also for editing, you're a Photoshop user?
I import all my images into Lightroom first, where I do like basic exposure and do a little bit of cropping, get the color dialed in, and then every image will go into Photoshop where I'll do the final crop, especially if I need to remove wires or like the red straw from the air, the compressed air. All of that stuff will be done in Photoshop.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Marta Camacho, where did you get your Kermit? She's looking for one.
Where did I get my Kermit? I got it on Amazon. Yeah.
On Amazon.
Let's see. The Kermit that I showed here is from a company called Diamond Select Toys. And I think they still make it, but I'm not sure. If they don't, you'll have to find it on eBay or something like that.
Okay, one last question, and then we're gonna wrap this up. Also from Paul, who's a big fan. Says that you're an absolute inspiration for himself and many, many more within the toy photography community around the world. He finds himself talking to his toys when he's setting them up. And he's wondering if this is something that you've ever done or if he needs to get locked up.
Well, first of all, regardless of my answer, he needs to get locked up. Okay, I'll say that first and foremost. But the only time I talk to my toys is if they're not doing what I want, and I end up swearing at them. A lot of times you'll spend so much time on getting them put into position, and especially if you have multiple figures and one falls, then they all fall, and that's when I end up basically yelling at them in words that I can't repeat here in this webinar. But that's the only time I talk to them. I think that's totally normal too, right? Like I wouldn't just have conversations with them.
I talk to my computer all the time. I insult her because she's slow, and then I love her when she does magic. We have to talk to the tools.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Well, this has been a wonderful talk. I just can't thank you enough for sharing all this amazing wealth of knowledge. You are a fascinating person. I love that you discovered your true calling later in life. It makes a lot of us just really hopeful that maybe the best is still ahead. And I love your story.
Thank you. You know what? I'm really hoping again that people don't have to wait decades to find what they love, right? Like if I knew then what I know now, like when I was shooting weddings, I would have done so many things differently. I would have found that niche even within wedding photography. So I really want people that hear this to really think about how they can find that niche to work in, how they can find a niche that they can dominate and own, or how they can differentiate themselves from all of the other people that are working in that same space. Because I think doing one or both of those things will make a huge difference, and you don't have to wait until you're 50 something to really find that dream career that you are hoping to find. You can do it sooner. So absolutely start thinking about those things. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Mitch. That's super inspiring. Find your niche, you guys. Take risks and own your story. That's the message that Mitch leaves us with. Absolutely. This is a wrap, guys. We are done for this webinar. We are going to be resharing it again on YouTube tonight, so you can rewatch it. And it's saved on Facebook, so if you missed any part of it, go ahead and rewatch it on Facebook later. Thank you so much, team. Thank you, Shireen, for helping me.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Shireen. Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate you guys. And thank you for everybody that came and checked this out or is checking it out on YouTube. I appreciate you all. Feel free to reach out to me on Instagram if you have any questions. I'm an open book. I'll share any information. I'll help you out with anything that you need. So don't be shy. Just reach out.
Thank you so much. Muchas gracias.
Thanks, Mitch.
See you later.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.